Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support. Welcome to this week's Top Lines and Tails, and this week we're going all the way to Canada, and we're going to talk to both Lee and Dawn Wilson from Miller Wilson Angus. Both of you, welcome to Top Lines and Tails.
Good morning, Andy.
Morning. Or it's probably not morning there, but it's good morning here.
It is afternoon here, but that's great. That's the beauty of the internet, that we can all work all over the world there. So, Miller Wilson Angus, I mean, one of the most familiar names in Angus worldwide, Angus royalty, I would say. Both of you there. So, congratulations on bringing the herd so far to the front of the pack.
Well, thank you. We're never going to live up to that introduction, though.
And we did meet briefly, we met down at the World Expo a few weeks ago and had a brief chat there. But I'd like us to go back a little bit to the beginning of both of you. Lee, if I can start with you, I believe you worked at Skillimano, and that's a well-known herd in itself, going back the way.
Boy, yeah, I did, Andy. I actually, as a young guy in my junior high years and senior high school years, I worked there on the weekends and helped Bill with whatever he needed help with. And that's where my first Angus come from, was some bred heifers we bought from Skillimano.
Okay. And but your family goes back a lot further than that, I believe.
Yeah, we do. We moved out here in the early 1900s with Shorthorns, and Shorthorns was the mainstay breed for a long time. And that was the first Angus was 1979, I believe, that I bought my first Angus. And within 2 years, the herd was completely black.
Okay. And quite a few of those from Skillimano, or did you buy?
We had a half a dozen started with, and we ended up with two that became old cows, and cows that actually, I think they even came to Bashaw with me. No, it'd be 10, 12 years later.
Okay. And Dawn, then the DMM herd is again famous, and that's your family, I believe, is it? Is that so, the DMM?
Yeah, it is actually. That's my initials, is Dawn Margaret Miller, way back when. So yeah, we started in the city. I lived in Edmonton until I was 11 years old, and mom and dad, there were 6 kids in my family and my parents, and I think they thought they better get these rowdy kids out to the country before something wild happens. So that move was in 72.
Okay.
And so we've had Angus since 72.
Right. And for those of you, the listeners of mine there who are familiar with Angus, even if you're not familiar with Angus, you'll know the name, of course, of DMM Miss Essence, and a very famous cow she was. But you hit the straps a little bit earlier than that, really, with Esoteric. Would that be the one?
Esoteric?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, way back when, and some of this progeny would have come to your country, was Wandering Creek Dynasty JRM2F.
Okay.
And he was from the Wilfred Schultz herd, which was right at Bashaw where Lee and I live. There was a massive amount of Angus breeders in a very small area.
Okay.
And back then, Angus weren't as popular as they are now, obviously, in our country. They were in yours probably, but not in ours. And so it was quite a feat for all of these people to decide that they were going to back Angus cattle. And it speaks to the brand of Angus, because they were easy keeping, easy to work with, and easy to use. So even though they weren't commanding top price at the auction markets, it was still a go-to for people because of just how adaptable the Angus breed is.
And the breed, of course, we're going through change back then, change on your side, definitely change on our side, where we realized we got to, I say our side in Scotland, we realized that we'd got cattle so small they were dysfunctional, and there was a flow of people coming across to Canada to pick up those genetics. Couldn't get them out of America, of course, at the time, coming across to Canada to pick up those genetics, and you'd be in the right place in the right time when those guys came calling, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always an ebb and a flow, isn't there? And you're trying to decide what's the best next step in the breed, and that was the best next step at the time, for sure.
Okay. So you've certainly been with that a long time, then, the pair of you, and I believe you met in this showroom. We always like a love story on the Top Lines and Tails, and you guys met in this showroom there, I believe. How lovely.
We did. It was inevitable, I guess, at some point. But she was trying to teach me a lesson, Andy, as it were. Here we are. She's still teaching that lesson.
So you'd be showing your own cattle, well, you'd both be showing against each
No,
other, I guess.
actually, well, Jimmy Joe Henderson, who you'd know, and I had a fitting service. Oh man, that would be back in the late '80s, I suppose. So we would go to lots of fairs and shows and have truckloads of cattle, and Don would come along and beat us all the time. It was I was destined to happen, I guess. I chased her pretty hard, Andy.
Well, thankfully you caught her anyway, and the two of you combined to what we now have as the Miller Wilson herd. I think 1989 would that be the be? Can you remember your wedding anniversary, Lee?
That's right. And don't quote me on a date, but that was 1989.
Yeah, okay. And so that's herd had been going a long time, and obviously, as I said, with a lot of depth in behind it there. And just bring me up to speed, to date a little bit now. And how many cows do you have? And you do a lot of fleshing these days, that are mainly donor cows, I guess.
We do, Andy. We're generally, I guess it depends on the year, but we'll have 4 to 6 to 8 donors, and we'll flush them. The good donors we'll keep open for the year and flush, and then we'll get them back in calves for the following year. But we'll be putting embryos into close to 100 cows probably here, and we're breeding close to that many, 100 as well. But the donors is our mainstay. We put embryos into some pretty good cows here, knowing that what we're going to get out of these big donor cows, right?
Okay, so you're using some of your own cows as embryos, as
We
recipients,
do.
as and when you
We
need them. Yeah.
do. We try to find places off farm to put embryos in, but it's difficult to
Uh-huh.
find the place that wants to do the work, I guess. And
Sure, sure.
um, so yeah, we'll put in 80 to 100 embryos here, and it really does make a difference at come weaning time where these calves end up in which pen they go to, and the ET calves come to the forefront pretty regular.
Yeah, sure, sure. And maybe you have a bit of a world market with those embryos as well, and we'll come on to that in a second. I just want to step back a little bit there. I mean, our listener here, I mentioned just now, DMM Miss Essence 22B, probably one of the most famous cows in the world there, and she won a lot of shows. And just when did she fit into this to this equation? And was this pre Miller Wilson?
Yeah, Andy, it was pre Miller Wilson. My mom and dad, but especially dad, was very focused on the mother cow, and I think that that probably was what your country was can take great credit for, and you still do. I mean, you still name your cattle after the mother as we do, and
Yeah.
that isn't something that is written in stone here. We don't have to do that, but we think it's really, really important because those family lines, one cow can make a huge, huge difference. So a long, long, long time ago, we had well, the esoteric bull that raised him and his mother were or him and sorry, her mother were what the combination that made the Miss Essence 22B cow, and she won Farm Fair International 2 years in a row, and she won Agribition 2 years in a row, and she made a huge impact on our herd.
Yeah, yeah, and she won. There was a truck, I believe, at Farm Share to be won there, and I think was she not known as the truck cow because she won it a few times, but you won
Well,
quite a few of those trucks, I think.
yeah, she was prior to the trucks, but yeah,
Okay,
we've won it. Yeah.
you won a few. Well, maybe talk about the trucks in a second if we run out of anything else to say. And just go back to that Miss Essence, some embryos there. I believe John Moores at the Moss had some embryos in there, and I'm right in thinking the Moss, Mr. Ashton, with
Yep.
£36,000. I think was he one of her daughters, or certainly her line.
Son, yep.
Yeah.
He was a son.
Mr. Espresso would have been another
Yeah,
one.
there was
Willie
three.
Brown had.
Yeah, there was three sons that came out of that mating that were did incredibly well. Yeah.
Okay, and Netherton Missy, I think 30,000 if she made going back the way as well, and again a famous line that will be very much through the middle of the Angus, most of the Angus herds in the UK.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
Okay, okay, and you had a Blackbird line there as well. Am I jumping forward a little bit now to the Blackbird? Was that DMM or
Yes.
was it?
Yes, that's when we were Miller Wilson
Oh,
already. Yeah.
okay, okay. So I've got to guess with it. You'll have to excuse me there. I don't quite have the full timeline. But so the Miss Essence family came in from your herd there, and which sort of lines came in from your own herd there, Lee, that were prominent, are prominent in the herd today?
And no, that would have been cows that were here. Tell you, Andy, when I brought my cows over, tell you the honest truth, there was two that we kept as cows, and the rest got embryos. So
Okay, okay, okay.
and so mine were princesses, and we had princesses here for some time, but
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'll let Dawn carry on about the 105A. That's her baby.
Okay, you carry on.
Well, yeah, well, it's both of ours, but the Blackbird line came through. There was an original Blackbird that had both Scottish and Australia, or sorry, New Zealand breeding in her,
Okay.
and Canadian, and so that's where that Blackbird came through for many generations, and she has been a phenomenal cow in our herd and a phenomenal line. We've obviously kept that Blackbird name for a reason
Uh-huh.
because we are even, she's made a huge, huge impact on our herd.
And the Blackbird line originated then with you. And when those, I think Rawburn, I think Blealac, Netherton, and I'm talking the probably mainstay names in the UK. All three of them would have Blackbird bird lines in there, I believe.
For sure. And so somewhere back when definitely came from your country. No
Okay.
question. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and the trade in embryos, I mentioned them in William McLaren Senior was buying embryos from you years ago. It's not something new, is it? But that you've been trading embryos across the water, and obviously an easy way to shift animals rather than shifting them live.
Well, it really is. I mean, when you think of the cost and we used to do it in Canada, import from your country and you've imported from our country and that cost was it was phenomenal in comparison to what you can ship a tank full of embryos or a tank full of semen for.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah, it's a game changer because as we know, those embryos are coming out of the very, very, very best cows in a herd.
We
When
can
when you're shipping live cattle, you're not getting, or lots of times you're not getting the very, very, very best cow in a herd.
we
hmm
can ship genetics just about as fast as we can send you a picture now, Andy.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There you go. That's brilliant. So that's with your donors there. I know. Maybe we'll go on to Australia in a minute, but I know there was embryos there that you've shipped to Australia there, and do people just come to you and say, I want some embryos. Do you have an embryo sale? Do you have an on-farm sale? I mean, how do you promote your embryos, or don't you need to?
Well, Dawn should probably let her do. Dawn handles the embryo sales, and I'll tell you why. We've gone to shows for years, and we'd come back at night and say, "Oh, I sold these," and she'd say, "Oh shit, so did I."
Okay.
So Don handles the embryo sales, but everything's private. And I texted a young fellow last night from the UK just on a cow we bred yesterday to flush, and he'll either speak for him or he won't, and then they'll go into our inventory list, and people will just email up or phone up and say, "I need your inventory," and we'll send it to them, and we'll strike a deal.
Okay. Okay.
Our embryos are qualified to ship most everywhere. Now you've got some different rules coming in or just moved into the UK country, I believe, but we work around as much of that as we can to try and accommodate wherever these may be going. So
Yeah, we try to keep an inventory, Andy, so that they're available when someone needs them because we're the same. When we want something, we'd like it now. We're in a real now world, so things are readily available, and so that's why we keep an inventory.
Okay, I understand that. I mean, you say about the different rules and regulations, they do trade and do change, and you've obviously got to keep running around, keeping up with getting qualified for these particular countries. And are there countries that it's difficult to get them into embryos? Well, UK for one, I guess.
well, the UK isn't so bad. South Africa is difficult just because their SNP test is outdated. So, but that's an issue for registering cattle there.
Okay.
Um,
Well, yeah, they're actually on microsatellite
yeah.
DNA, and the rest of the world's on SNP, and so it makes it a little more difficult. But UK is a little more difficult in lots of well, anything that's EU is because they have to be out of an EU qualified bull, and in our country, most people vaccinate because we vaccinate for IBR, and
Okay.
so in your country, they don't allow semen to be used out of an IBR, uh, a bull that would test positive or a carrier for it and they're going to once they're vaccinated. So it really limits the sires that you can use.
Limits the size you can use. I'm going to say, do you just have bulls running around that aren't vaccinated, or do you just? Oh, I guess you must
Yeah.
pick semen from them first and vaccinate them later, maybe.
Well, it's really difficult because if you're going to show them at all or you're going to go anywhere at all, it's tough to keep them negative.
We
hmm
do on occasion have the odd IBR negative one, but we'll identify a group of young bulls and then we'll try to work with them and try to. Our winters are hard because now we're confining them more, so we will have tighter show up in some of these cattle that were negative previously, but Um, Last year it didn't work. We had six bulls that we tried to work, and but they all showed it tighter come time to go to the stud. So
Yeah.
Hmm.
it's not as easy as we wish it was.
No, no, nothing's ever as easy as it seems, is it? But you still carry on with the shows. I mean, you're still going out there competing at all the shows, or many of the shows. You do a lot, or select few. Or, I mean, I know you're certainly prevalent on the show circuit as a marketing tool.
The farm fair exhibition, of course, are our main ones, the big shows. We will go to a few other fall ones for warm-up shows for them, and they're good advertising as well. But it's the bigger shows, farm fair, exhibition. They're the ones that the exhibitor, the foreigners will come to attend, and really that's who we're trying to display to as much as anyone else is our foreign clientele. And yeah, we have to have a presence and we have to be doing well, or that embryo trade's gone, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It's not. You can't just turn up. You got to turn up and win. I understand what you're
Oh,
saying,
that's
and
right. We got enough customer cattle some years that we'll be doing good, and it's almost the same, but you really do need to be there in a physical presence. Last year, actually, we skipped out agribition because the weather was so terrible, and we weren't the only ones. But going there, I wish we went there later without cattle, but the roads were so terrible, we just kind of said no. And I wished we'd have been there because there was enough foreigners that would have liked our type of cattle. I don't know, we don't go crazy over number EPDs here, I guess. We like factual data, and we like cattle that are big, robust with some bone and some power, which suits a lot of our foreign markets, right?
okay, okay. That's I was going to go on to the slightly different type of cattle that they have in the USA and different again in Canada, Australia, and the UK, and a sort of middle ground where you guys must be if you're hitting all those markers. We'll just go back to that farm fair a minute. I have to talk about this truck again. I mean, how many of those things did you win? We're not just talking a little baby truck here. There was a pretty hefty big truck there. And was that for winning champion Angus? Was that what it was about?
It's the Supreme, so there'll be a show of all the champions from three different shows show up at Farm Fair,
Okay,
from Olds Lloyd, and Farm Fair, and so all the champions of all breeds are in that. And there's usually, oh my, I want to say 40 head of female, but about the same amount of bulls, depending on how many times you qualified. And so that's where the truck comes from. There's five judges of different breeds and different aspects of the beef industry. Sometimes, lots of times, the foreigner on that panel as well.
mm,
We never know who the judges are. There's one person on that runs the show that picks them, so even the beef committee is unaware of who the supreme judges are.
okay.
But I think we've won that show 10 times. There was only seven times where there was trucks available, but it it's been a tremendous advertising venue for, well, just not only the show but for us. And Dodge Trucks was gracious to sponsor it for a long time, and we lost it during COVID, so hopefully we'll get it back one day. But that was the talk of the world, really. Who won the trucks? Who won the trucks, right?
Yeah.
And if it was money, it wouldn't matter. But it's kind of
Well,
cool that it was trucks.
yeah, the second-hand car lot there for a while, I gather. But no, that's just brilliant. I'm being flippant. That's an absolutely fantastic achievement, and I just wanted to mention it for that reason, really. That probably
Thank you.
nobody's ever quite done that achievement, for 10 times at one event, being champion of champions, and probably in any show in the world, let alone a show they're giving you a truck away. So congratulations.
Well, maybe a good shout out to Dodge will get us back again, Andy.
We'll see. We'll see if we can get him on. See if we can get him on. And just going on to your own breeding now. Obviously, you got to keep up, ahead of the pack. You got to keep finding new blood. I guess. Are you sourcing new blood, fresh blood all the time, or are you just breeding your own replacement bulls?
Good.
Well, it's a little of both, Andy. I think that we really try to source donor cows as much as we try to source a bull because we are pretty confident in what our bulls can do. And so we'll try to find a donor cow that we can breed our own bulls to raise another herd sire. But we
Okay.
do both ways. We're always sourcing bulls too, but we yeah, if we can find a donor cow that we can work off of, we really believe in maternal. We really do believe in the power of the mama cow. And
Okay.
so yeah, we do both for sure.
You know, a
Okay.
cow pedigree or a sire's pedigree doesn't matter. If you can get as many great cows in that pedigree and stack them up on top of each other, on top of each other, it really does take the guesswork out of it.
Okay.
And with if we can find donor cows that we like and we purchase wherever they may be, then we can go back and it's outcrossed our own bulls that we can use, right?
Okay. Okay.
Where here our donors are quite often related pretty close to all the bulls we're using or the bulls we've raised. But as far as producing sires, we'll flush to a lot of different outside bulls and try to raise that bull to carry on with.
Okay. Okay. And let's just talk about the animals. As I said, the slight difference there. Would your cattle be maybe a bit more moderate? I certainly saw your cattle in Australia. We'll talk about in a second, but slightly more moderate, with slightly bigger maybe than the American cattle, and maybe smaller than some of the big brutes we've got here in Aberdeenshire.
I would guess that's probably a fair assessment, Andy. But as anywhere, you can go anywhere in a country and find different sizes, types, kinds. But yeah, we probably always stayed on a little more on the powerful end of things here, and we would definitely not be on the high end of what your big cattle are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you emphasize obviously very much on feet and udders. That's highly important.
Oh yeah, feet, legs, structure, but doability. We want, sometimes in the show ring, especially, you'll hear judges that say this animal's too fat for me. We're way more concerned about the kind that can't get fat than the kind that can. So
Okay.
we're really focused on cattle that have some doability and
Okay.
some muscle and all of those things that make a good Angus and heads. It's funny because a lot of years ago, I remember when McLarens were here and Neil Massey and Bob Lane and lots of those guys commenting on heads, and on cattle. And we always watched heads, but not quite to the degree that they were always commenting on them. And boy, you can sure see why. Because if a head, a body follows a head. So if a head looks long and narrow, generally the body's that way too. And if a head's good doing and wide muzzled and the right kind of Angus head, boy, generally the body follows that as well.
Wise
You
words,
know,
and I
we
totally agree with you.
we learned a lot from them years, or I did for sure, listening to well Bob and Neil. Willie wouldn't say quite so much, but his opinion would be noted. Bob, he had always had a lot of comments, and you knew where he stood with Neil as well. It was good, and
You,
I wish that those boys could come back and do it again because there'd be a learning curve for everybody.
Well,
sure.
old Willie was, I mean, he was a great mentor back before Lee was around for us.
Okay.
And young William is taking the job and Karen, and they've done a phenomenal job too.
Yeah. Then you mentioned amongst those four that you mentioned there that there'd be probably Willie Robertson from Nightingale, I guess, would be another visitor too, would you?
Oh,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah.
Yes, him too. Thought about him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the guys that were in the beginning, I suppose, of the revolution of starting the breed back on the road it needed to go back on, and great pioneers, and we take our hat off to them, and well worth studying, as I've studied quite a few of these when we've been writing books recently. And you talk about your cattle there got to have durability. It's cold in Alberta. I've not been there because it's too cold. I will go one of the days, but my wife's not coming. It's you get a lot of cold weather there. I mean, the cattle come inside. I mean, how doable are they in this cold weather?
Well, yeah, it can get unbearably cold. We were minus 50 last year for a while, but it is what we call a dry cold. But it's still, yeah, it's unbearable at times. They don't come inside. We don't house them like you guys do, but we have wind fences, shelters, lots of straw. We look after them because they look after us.
Okay, okay.
You
So
know
they got
that our average winter, Andy, would be -10 and sun shining and frost in the ground, of course, snow covered. So it's quite a beautiful day at -10. The -50, no one likes it, and there's no reason to live here when it's -50. But these calves are born. It's amazing what these little calves will take. And of course, we're crazy. We want a calf for January 1st all the time. And these young babies, they'll be a week old once they're out of the barn, back into that weather, and they're sheltered good enough, but they're not in heated facilities, these babies, and they do fine.
okay. That's a great advert for the durability of the breed of the Angus breed, and we've heard that from them living inside the equator in the hot weather, right through to extremes like you've got there. And they are a very pliable breed, isn't it, the Angus?
It really is.
Oh, you're so right, Andy. That's why Angus can live anywhere in the world, realistically. There are definitely climates that aren't, as advantageous to a black hide or, but they still will adapt. They're just a highly adaptable breed, and that's also why you see so much crossbreeding within the commercial industry because Angus cattle will work. They'll work with any breed anywhere.
Uh-huh. Okay, there we go. And to your most recent then, are there bulls or and donors that you're excited about? Is there something that you need to plug on here that people should be the next thing that they should be looking at? Where is your breeding at just now?
Well, the blackbirds are a real focus for us because it's come down for several generations and they're just tremendously strong. So we've got three young donors that we're flushing right now in the blackbird line. The Christina is a new line that we got from Barry Young from Youngdale,
Okay.
and she's been tremendous. She's just a tremendous cow.
Georgina.
And then the Georginas are three of our main focuses right now.
Okay.
So yeah, they're what's coming down the pipe.
And where did the Georgina line come from? Is that your own?
Yeah, well, it comes from I'm sure back in your country as well. Way,
Yeah.
way, way. Yeah.
We bought the original Georgina, Duralta Georgina from Dave Dury up at Lavoie.
Hmm.
And so we've produced quite a few daughters out of her. She's gone now, but we have a pretty good handful of daughters out of that cow that we're working with.
Good.
Yeah, they're big cows.
It's incredible how these lines do go back all that length of time, though, isn't it? The Ericas and such like to carry on through, and maybe been changed a little bit here on the way. But it's as you say, these cow families just have the strength and that name to back them up.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat to think that where it all started from and where it's come and where it's become. When you think that that breed started in Scotland and the tentacles are all over the world.
Mhm.
It's amazing when you think about it.
Sure, sure is. And we talk about all over the world. As I said, we met in Australia. We're down at the World Angus Forum and the World Angus Expo there in Tamworth in New South Wales, and I've banged on about that already on a previous podcast. But what a fantastic event that was there, Don.
Oh, it truly was. It was amazing. The venue was amazing. The cattle were really good. It was just a great opportunity to visit a lot of people in a very short period of time.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
was fantastic.
Yeah. And you sold some embryos to Graham Gilmore. Graham proudly stood there and said, "Well, this isn't my breeding; it's all yours." When he had a great lineup of cattle and animals that had won at Sydney show as well, and um, a good man there.
Oh, tremendous gentleman. I mean, just a tremendous operator. Yeah, he's next level good.
Yeah, he's a great stockman of any type of animal. But we get so fortunate that when we get to sell something that we find people that can do what Graham did for us, really, like just taking the pride and the care in the cattle like we would hope and presenting them like they do. Like he's top notch, as good as anyone there is in the world.
Mhm.
Him and Rach and um, other countries is the same, and it can really make or break a difference on the amount of business he'll do in a country is if you get him in the right hands to start with.
Sure, that's absolutely true, isn't it? So that's always the
Yeah,
buzz for any breeder is to sell animals to somebody you know that's going to go on there and fly the flag for yourself.
that's exactly right. Well, and for them too, like it's his mindset is very similar to ours in far as raising cattle and the production of cattle or sheep in his world. Um, so yeah, it was a nice fit for both of us.
Graham's been on this podcast in the past, and a fascinating one it was as well, talking about that high level land that they've got there, and of course developing the sheep. Did they sell you some sheep there, Graham? Graham will have some sheep sold to you, I'm sure he will.
Well, you know what? He's a salesman. He's still working on it, but
They'd live nicely in Alberta. They do like the coal, apparently.
you know
Well, they've
what?
got no wool.
There's a lot of money to be made in that Australian whites if we got them to Canada because I don't believe there's that many here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not a good sheep people, but we are looking for people that could accommodate putting some embryos in and start the breed here.
Certainly. Likewise in various parts of the world, and yeah, a fantastic success story that's been. And let's talk about your trade in embryos. I mean, there was talk in Australia about the trade of embryos maybe starting to go into China because China out of Australia. But is that a market that you guys are looking at as well? Is that somewhere you can get to from Canada?
Yeah, I believe it is, and definitely we look into that market. We sent live cattle to China quite a few years ago,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, it's that there's a lot of people to feed in that country. Cattle being so adaptable would be the perfect fit, right?
Sure. And other markets as well around the world is somewhere you're always looking at, or they just coming to you and you've got enough customers to take your supply?
I think it's a little of both for us.
Yeah, I don't know that we specifically draw a circle on a map and say, let's go after this. It's more, you come to Agribition, you come to Farm Fair, and hopefully that's where they can, as people come into our country, they go find something they like, and hopefully it'll work from there, right?
There you go.
But we specifically, I guess maybe South Africa, some of them, when we were asked to judge, we would go and meet people, and that's opened a few doors for us, of course.
Sure. Sure. So, but there you go, folks. If you want to go and see some good cattle there, get yourself out to Farm Fair and Agribition. What times of the year are they? Are they? Remind me.
November.
The very first part of November would be Farm Fair, and Agribition's 10 days behind. So it's a nice break to get a few days in touring cattle.
Yeah.
Uh, Certainly try and get there myself shortly. And let's just talk about the Red Angus. They're starting to gather some traction over here now. Seems to be, hey, Red Angus have never gone away. I know they've always been big all over the world, and Argentina particularly when we were down there last year. But the Red Angus cattle now starting to get a foothold, I think, in Europe.
Yeah, Red Angus cattle have been strong in our country for many, many years. There's some very, very good breeders. We've got just a small number of Red Angus, and they've been very good to us. But yeah, there's some tremendously good breeders in this country, and they've been doing very well in the industry for a lot of years.
I think Red Angus, the Canadian Red Angus breeders as a whole, is as good a Red Angus as you find anywhere in the world.
Okay.
Because they're big enough to suit a lot of markets, but yet they're tough enough, like our blacks. They're very similar to the black cattle here. They're big enough, and they can accommodate any kind of going into a foreign country. They can adapt, and they can clearly ring a bell.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And do the Red Angus run as a separate society, a separate association there, like they do in America?
Go ahead, Don.
No, they don't, Andy. They're all under one umbrella here, the one association.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of nice. And you're able to register in each book, unlike, of course, the American are not able to. But
Okay. And you're getting a call for Red Angus embryos across the world?
yeah, like I said, we don't we have one donor that we concentrate on, and she's been awfully good, but yeah, no, we do get calls for Red Angus. We either source embryos or we produce a few, but not like we produce black embryos.
When our red thing started, it was black parents that had their first red born here, and that
Yeah.
now become a brand new bloodline for the red people. And she turned out to be pretty good. And that was Miss Essence 42G. We were sad that she was a heifer at the time, but as it turned out, she made way more money and become a pretty famous cow. And she'd been a Red Bull. We just sold him to someone, and he'd been gone.
Yes, you're right. So yeah,
We started our red lines, and so we had a little different bloodline to work with, and we had some daughters out of her, and then we bought a few cows that were similar to her, bigger bone, bigger stouter cows that we could find lots of bulls to put on them that worked.
brilliant. And let's just move sideways a little bit, or down, should I say, because I think you've both had a fair bit to do with the Angus Youth. And again, at the World Forum, I was there following the Angus Youth competition that was going on there. All these youngsters getting stuck into to learning about the thing and the competitions that they did, and you've done a bit with that.
Yeah, we sit on a couple of pretty our boards for Angus, or not for Angus, for all breeds actually. So we run a show called the Junior Nationals in which is in our hometown in Basha. Our facilities in Basha were built by Angus breeders and other like-minded people. Oh gosh, many years ago, and it was specifically built on the ag grounds for cattle. So they were
Okay.
open pole sheds. They had a wash rack. Those whole facilities were built for cattle. So these little grounds in Basha, the town has got 900 people, and it almost doubles in size sometimes for some of these. But yeah, so we sit on the Canadian Junior Nationals board, and we run. It's kind of the amalgamation of all of the junior shows. It's the very last show. There's lots of different competitions. The National Young Cattlemen's Competition. There's judging competition that ends here. There's Supreme Champion of all the other junior shows ends here. it's a phenomenal show.
And quite often, that Supreme Champion looks the same as
Yeah,
Farm Fair in Regina.
yeah. Some of them have been the same Supremes that have been Farm Fair and Regina. But the bigger thing, I think, and the vision of the people way back that started this, which my parents were on that board and a few other people, that their vision was to have youth do all of their work on their own. Once they got to the show, they could have all the guidance that, your parents can guide you, but they can't be hands-on. And I think it was a game changer at the time because it just made kids, well, have pride in what they do, for one thing, pride in accomplishing what they accomplished by themselves and not be on the coattails of their parents. And so that show still to this day, it runs like that.
Okay.
There's no parent participation once they're at the showgrounds.
Brilliant. They let them stand on their own 2 feet, and what a fantastic thing! And it is brilliant to bring these youngsters on. And what age do your youth go through? What are they from and up to?
Well, from 2 years old to 21. So yeah.
21, okay, because I think some of them, I thought that you're slightly younger, whereas some of the youth, I think, with ours, is it 26, I think, or certainly older anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And your Canadian team that were down there at the World Forum there, were they successful and did something that you knew?
Well, we had two Canadian teams and they did amazing. I mean, not quite as good as your team, but I mean, your team was in the top four, and that's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great competition, though. Those it's just impressive to watch those youth do what they do, the skills they have, and the ability to talk to people and camaraderie and all the things that you would hope in a good stockman.
Sure.
Are in those kids.
Brilliant, and we've said this before with Angus, the youth, certainly the one over here. It's not just, you don't just have to be Angus breeder. You don't even have to be an Angus enthusiast. In fact, you don't even have to be a farmer at all. You can just go along there and join up and get some good out of this whole youth organisation.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely brilliant. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to the pair of you there. It was nice to meet you the other day and we had dinner, and then it was a bit of a rush, but I did say that we'd like to catch up with you, and it's been a great to catch up today, and appreciate, well, I'm going to try and get over to Farm Fair in the next year or so, and anybody else listening to this as well, get over to Farm Fair and Agribition, two fantastic shows that you have there in Alberta.
Well, Andy, I would definitely invite you to come to Farm Fair, and anyone else listening. I don't know who's our UK representative. William helps go to Agribition Farm Fair goes.
Yeah.
Get a hold of us here at Miller Wilson, and we can help maybe accommodate any travel issues that you might have. Or you go ahead. You know more about this.
Well, both Farm Fair and Agribition are really must-attend shows in Canada. If you have the chance to hit them both, it's fantastic. And Andy, we definitely would love to see you come. So yeah, definitely come on over.
There we go. There's an invite that I can't turn down. That's fine. My wife says I don't stay at home enough at the moment, but I haven't been in Canada since I was last in Toronto, which is the show there, which is a long time ago. So maybe it's time I made that visit. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to the pair of you, as I said, and really appreciate, as I said at the top of the show, Angus royalty on this show, and that's great that you can take the time to speak to us on Top Lines and Tails. Well,
thank you. We enjoy your podcast. I really enjoyed your one with Tom Burke. Actually, that was an excellent production.
Thanks very much. Well, great to speak to you. All the best. Thank you.
Andy, it was so great to meet you.
Thank you, Andy. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tails. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, for their continued support with the Top Lines and Tails podcast. And this time of year, there's plenty of grass starting to come through. And although we ought to probably start thinking about creep feeding those calves to start to take the pressure off the cows as we head towards weaning time. And creep feeding is a great way to minimise the weaning check, but also to take advantage of that inbuilt efficiency of young calves. So get in touch with Harbro and hear more about their range of calf creep options. Contact your local Harbro representative or pop down to your local store or find them there on the internet at harbro.co.uk. And while you're there on the internet, don't forget to look up our Top Lines and Tails Facebook community, where you'll find information about this and previous podcasts.